Hello, welcome back. We're here again with another episode of our Mega-lo-Mania clone in Unreal Engine. Continuing off from yesterday, where we managed to get our minimap and the interaction of to affect our sector. So the plan today was to try and work on the main menu area, which lives underneath the minimap, but we might not get to that, so it's going to be a bit of a short stream today, and I've done some research in working with the click interaction to see if we can improve that. So the original click interaction that we have was to add click events to each of the sections of the minimap, which would obviously mean that we'd have to tie up each of those each of those sections to their click event and to their hover event potentially later on, and potentially to so that's the on cursor over. There's an on cursor off, or whatever they call it. So look, on end cursor over, and all those kind of interaction events that we'd have to add individually to the minimap parts. And then we've got different interaction with the actual sector that we haven't got to yet, but there'll be interaction there. So we'd have to have click events here doing various things, and having all of those click events all over the place might actually mean that kind of controlling the user interaction would be difficult. So I read today that the click or the kind of player interaction goes through a couple of layers, and to get to where we are, it's actually quite a low down layer in terms of how that event propagates down, or potentially kind of goes through each of the blueprints. So the key thing is that the events, kind of user interaction events, propagate to the player controller first, and then if that doesn't handle them, it will go to the level, and then if that doesn't handle it, then it will go to the actor that's actually there. Now, something else that we did yesterday to get the events to work on the minimap were to actually enable them from the player controller. So within the player controller's class defaults, we actually had to enable click events, and so on and so forth. Now, if we just make sure everything's tied up again, because I've been experimenting with what's what, so just make sure everything is as it should be, pretty much as we left it yesterday. So in this case, we should get the two events on these two pieces because we haven't tied up that one, and that is as the case is. But if we turn off within the player controller the click events, we can see that they don't do anything. It makes a lot of sense, but by having those off by default, it does seem to imply that having that, hello again Darabelle, it does imply that perhaps doing it via the actor, as we were doing, perhaps isn't the best way. So we're going to look at alternative methods, and basically the alternative method is this that we've got outlined here. So I have put it together prior to starting the stream just to verify that it actually does work. Almost. It doesn't do everything that we want yet, but the concept should work. So we're in the player controller, and we've added the left mouse button event. So we can add event for, say, the right mouse button. Get it right. Right mouse button. For example, we can do that one too. So that's how we've added it. And then we've tied that pressed event to a print string. And that prints, basically, we use this get hit result under cursor by channel, the channel being visible. And kind of pretty much just left the defaults as it was. So that should give us the, it just says result structure, but we then drag that result structure over, and one of the first things it suggests is this hit result, break hit result, and that gives us a whole bunch of other properties, whether it's blocking, initial overlap, the time that it happened, and a whole bunch of other stuff, most of which within our case won't actually be necessary or useful or even relate to anything. But what is important is the component. So we take that component, we use this get object name that we've used elsewhere, which returns our string, and we add to it controller hit and then that string, and then we print that out. So now if we actually run this without any other changes, we get the number for the bit of land that we're hitting, including the one that we haven't tied up the click event to. Now we haven't untied these events are still here, but because we've deselected the class defaults enable click events, they don't do anything, they don't fire, but we're still getting that number that we want. And I did try the same code within the level, exactly the same layout that we have, except the only addition is the get player controller, because obviously within the player controller context, target can be self because target is a player controller, but within the level there is no default player controller, so you have to get one. In this case, the index 0, which is player 0. And if we tie that up and save it and run, we actually find that it doesn't say anything because the controller is still capturing that event. So we can break the mouse event here and then run it again, and now we get it in the level. So the event doesn't fire in more than one place, but we can capture it at the level or the controller level, and as we've seen previously, we can even capture it in the actors. But the next thing to consider is that the player controller is designed to be persistent throughout the entire game, from the moment the user starts the game to the moment they end the game. I'm not sure whether it's possible to recreate player controllers. I would expect so, but I haven't looked into that. But if the player controller is shared across all of the components of the game, so any menus that we have or anything like that, it would be awkward to capture all of the events within here because you'd end up with a forever growing list of stuff. Whereas in the level can capture the event and only interact with the things within the level, and then would have different levels, given that's the way that Unreal separates things off. Different levels for different things like the main menu, the island selector, even the character selector, and the level would handle where the user clicks. So that makes sense. But again, I'm not 100% certain where this kind of interaction should be. I think the consensus that I got from the bits and pieces that I read was that it really depends on the complexity of the game. The more complex the game, the more likely it would work better in one place or another. For really simple games, it doesn't really matter where you put it. But we're going to leave it in the level because it's almost the easiest one to work with, and we'll see how that goes. But the nice thing is this core section of it is the same regardless of where we put it, and most of what it will actually do is going to be the same between whether it's in the level or not. So we can get rid of our string part, but we're going to keep the get object name. Now, the hit result gives us two things that are important to us. The actor and the component. Now, within our level, we have, if we go over to the game, we have, I suppose it may not actually be there because this is at the almost at the game editor, the world level, not the level again. But nonetheless, we have the minimap actor and we have the sector actor, both of the bits that are important for us at the moment. Both of the things that the user's going to interact with on this level. Potentially the sector and the minimap could be created by the level when the level is started, but I'm not sure what the difference is between dragging them in and doing that, but we know they exist and we know they work, and we know the users actually needs to interact with the minimap, so we're dragging a reference here. I think there's already a reference here, isn't there, where we render the appropriate map. So when the left mouse button is clicked, we could actually close some of these windows. Within the minimap, add a function to handle the selection of a component. And we know here that for the original click events that we had, we were handling the component that had been clicked on. So all of this code, all of that section of it, is effectively going to be the same. As we can see here and here, they are the same for the particular click event. So that's what we want to create a function from. And based on a comment, I thought we could create a function. Maybe that's that. Collapse to a function. See what that does. Oh yes. And not quite what we wanted in terms of the function, but let's work with that. So that's select sector. How was that different from set select sector? Okay, so that sets it. So maybe we'll want this one to be on click sector, just so that it's clear that it's an actual event. We don't need 2 scene components in here, we only need the one, and we tie that up to both places. And yeah, we just need to remove it from here too. Even though this isn't actually going to be used, we've removed that duplication in those cases. But what we actually want to do now is we can effectively ignore that, and we jump back into our game, and when the left mouse button is clicked, we can call on our actor our on sector. Can we call that? Where's it gone? On click selector. Let me get my names right. On click selector function. So we call our function, and we've got the component that we care about, so we can just pass that straight in. We can save that and then play, and we should be able to do the selection on all 3 components now without having to tie up those individual events. So that's worked out fairly easy. We've saved, even if we had that function in place, we'd have to do this 16 times with this mechanism. We don't have to do it at all. If we did do cursor overs and begins and ends, then we'd have to do them 16 times as well, and we don't have to do them at all, because we can have potentially the over, I guess. I haven't looked at whether we can handle the over events in a similar fashion, but at the moment we really just wanted the click events to work cleaner, and doing it as we've now got it. Let's refocus this. So all of that was what we were doing before, which we also don't need. Event begin play is a bit in a weird place. It's not ideal, but it works. Yeah, so we've got the click events on all of our sectors without having to tie up individual events to them. Obviously we've only got 3 of our sectors for this particular map. We can switch the map in the level. Is it the level? Or was it the mini-map? No, it was the mini-map that was driving the selection. We need to find our islands, the name of our other island. Set that. And we've got the 2 islands that we can switch between, again without having to tie up the events to those particular island parts. So now when I get to adding all the other islands to our data table, I know the selection for each of those different sectors are going to work straight away. So one thing that we did mention yesterday was that the mini-map shouldn't control which island we're on. At the very least, it should be something that the level has, not the island. And another thing that we have is which sector is selected. But for now, it's just selecting the first. Obviously, once we've got the game starting properly, it would actually select whichever place the player is starting on. But until we've actually got a player as such, we can't deal with that. But we can get the level from the game instead. So we set, I think the level was a string. Sorry, we called it the island. And we've added it as a component. It's in the variables, it's just under the components, I guess. So we have a name variable, which we've called island. Compile the blueprint to get our value. Take our value from here, place it in there. So this is where it makes sense to dynamically create our mini-map instead of have it on the map. But equally, I don't know how we would get kind of constructor variables. I'm not sure if that's possible. Constructor function doesn't seem to have any constructor variables, so you would have to initialize the map. Calvoth, is that? Yes, yes. It's definitely been entertaining working through this. As I've said in previous streams, I'm fairly new to Unreal Engine, so kind of learning it as I go. But so far it's going fairly well. So yeah, it's been good. Thank you. So I don't know how to create the minimap with the actual island that we'd want. And at the moment, get rid of the functions. The core event kind of sets things up on the event begin play in the assumption that it already knows the island. Yeah, Unreal Engine 4 is pretty good. I do C++ programming for my day job, but I think being able to kind of just work with the graph, I think it's not easier in the sense of I can do more faster, given I don't know it, but I think it's different enough that it keeps it entertaining. That's nice. Yeah, that would be something to aim for me. Obviously I need a lot more experience in it to even consider it being my day job, but do you work predominantly within the Blueprint environment or the C++ environment? Or do you mix both? So you actually work for Epic? Okay, well, it's a good job I said good things about it then. But yeah, I don't think my experience level with the Unreal Engine is good enough to really consider getting it as my day job, but definitely, as I say, something that I'd certainly be interested in moving forward. Given the way that it kind of falls together, and just the way it's put together is really good as well. The product I work in on my day job's got kind of a graphy based interface, but it's much simpler than this one. But I know when we were designing ours, we always said how good the blueprints within this product was. The products are obviously completely different, so there's no relevance in or overlap in that, but the fact that they have this kind of node connected to node thing is something that we've done. But as I say, the way that Epic's done it with all the individual pinpoints, and particularly I like the breaking things, that's worked really well as well. So so we were trying to get the right level in the minimap, and the easiest way I can think of doing it would just simply take most of what we've got in our constructor and put that into a function, and then pass in the island, because the minimap doesn't need to remember what the island is. It just needs to know that the island name, so that it can get the sector level parts to render it. Once it's rendered it, the island name shouldn't be required, at least not that I can think of. So we're going to take pretty much all of our code on the event begin. If I collapse this to a function, I'm not, given what it did last time, I'm not quite sure what it's going to do. Let's find out. Okay, didn't give me a whole host of arguments. It's quite neat. What's in the function? So I'm not sure if that's connected everything quite the same way, because the flow. Yeah, that wasn't connected. I think there was another connection from here after the break, and that wasn't connected. Not quite sure what the outcome of that would have been, but we've got it all back to normal. And the only other thing that we need now is, well, firstly we need to give the function a name, and we need to give it an input. So the input's going to be our island name. And that means we can take out all the references to island here. I think there's another one a bit further on. Nope, just there. Take out that and just tie that up in that way. We could probably do with reorganizing, at least in terms of the lines and all the bits and pieces of this one, but for now that works. And we'll do this as just call it set island. So I think actually we do use the island. We do use the island, don't we, in some of the other functions. This get selected sector name, we use the island there. So what we can do then is, in our set island call, we're set, the default is none anyway, so we'll set our island and that means we can use it within the function later on. And then when the game is begun, we set up the camera, we set up the event listener for sector selections, and then we want to set the minimap. So from the minimap we want to call set island, and we just want to pass through the island we've now defined here. And let's see where we are with that. Okay, started with the right island, I think. Just change it. And play again. Yep. So I think there's another part that's not quite correct, is the default sector is not relative to the default island piece. So as we say, we're kind of default selecting the first island piece, but we're not applying that because it's not getting the on sector selected call. So the on sector selected call, or the event dispatcher that we have, where is that handled? On click sector. So we call it when we click a sector, but we can also call it when we've default selected our selector. So yesterday we added this do once call in to set the selected sector, which goes into this function, set selected sector. So that positions the selection mark, as we call it, the select mark, but it doesn't actually select the item. And get selected sector name gets the name of the thing we've selected, and on click selector, get my selected and sectors mixed up. This one actually does set sector and calls the event and gets its name. So I think we've got kind of maybe that's why I was getting confused on names. Maybe too many functions involved here. We've got one that handles the click, which is here. We've got one that handles setting and moving the selection mark. And the name one I think is okay because that's literally just getting the name of a sector. It's not getting the name of the selected one specifically. So we're actually going to rename this function to just that. I think we can have spaces in them, yeah. Because it's just, we're giving it a sector or a scene component object reference, which is one of our sectors from this list. Whether you've selected or not doesn't matter, and we're just getting its name based on the island that the user is, or the player is on, or the minimap is displaying, and we're returning its name. So this function doesn't actually have anything to do with whether you've selected something or not. And the set selected sector moves the marker. So it would make sense that, being as we've specifically said that it's setting the selected sector, it would make sense that this one actually did the work for triggering that event instead of the on-click doing it. So we can simply take these two end nodes and move them into our set selected sector, and we'll position them after the location has been set. That means that whenever we call set selected sector, we not only move the marker, but we also trigger the event. So we go back into our click. That one works fine. There's no change needed, no further changes needed here. When you click on a sector, we set the selected sector. All the other bits done for us. When we're setting up the island, our do once calls on set selected sector, and again, we don't have to do anything else. So now, hopefully, we can run, and the map should reflect the right piece, which it does now. So we'll just change the map again to the only other one we have. I think we need, keep forgetting what it's called or how to spell it correctly, but I'm sure over time I'm going to remember these few first island names. that's that. And we can see again that the sector is representing the minimap's view. So we've got the kind of selection process for the minimap to kind of propagate all the things that we need. It finds the right sector, it selects the right sector, and updates the sector view, etc. Everything kind of works together rather than having to worry about doing more than one thing each time. So we had within our game level, we have the click event over here. So keyboard events, mouse events. Just seeing now if we can do any of the hover or over, I think it was. So we do have an event actor begin cursor over call. But that's, yeah, so that's about the actor, the game level almost in this case, having the mouse over it. So that's not actually going to be of any use. So it doesn't look like, at least not in the same way that we've tied up the mouse buttons or the left mouse button as it is at the moment. There's no way to tie up the mouse over. That would be useful in the sense that the cursor does change when we put the cursor over various things. So we are going to have to worry about what the mouse is over in various states. An obvious one would be the character selection. When the mouse is not over any of the characters, it flicks between each of their colours, so it kind of almost looks like a rainbow effect. But when you put it over certain characters, the mouse cursor goes their colour. And within the game, the mouse cursor changes for various things as well. So we'll just quickly go into one. So I think it changes when we get an army. It doesn't actually seem to change when the mouse is over anything. Maybe it happens in this case. I think there is a, yeah, so the only one that I can think of, put them back, other than what I've already covered, is when we're over here. No, so it doesn't actually look like the mouse cursor changes on over, but we do get the tutorial type help on the mouse over various things, so that's something to consider. But the tutorial might actually work better if it's tied to the individual actors. Definitely if we're kind of showing a piece of text for how that particular component within the user interface interacts with the player, depending on what they click. So aside from the definition of all of the islands within our data table, and then obviously kind of finishing off the minimap in terms of showing where players, players of the game have buildings, or whether they have armies, whether those armies are doing various states that they have. So there's a lot more to the minimap than simply displaying the sector, or the island, and being able to move around the sector. But we can't really progress with that part of it until we have more of the core game components done. So the next part, as I said yesterday, would be working on the menu. But the menu has quite a lot of icons. So if we go back, I think we probably already have the sprite loaded for that in our textures, the icons. So our menu has quite a lot of these sprites. These are all the tech levels, so they're not so bad. The mouse cursors, but then we've got the bits like the research, the combat, the shields, etc. They all need to be put into place, but they would need to be chopped out first. Unfortunately, again, it doesn't look like all of these icons are actually on the same grid, so I can't just chop them out based on using a grid. I'll probably have to chop them out each individually, so that's going to be a bit time consuming, but I'm not going to do that now. I think for today I'm going to stop here. Hopefully I'll get some time to chop out some of the icons we need for the menu, so I can prepare with a few things to make a start on that tomorrow, instead of obviously streaming 20 minutes of sprite chopping from the sprite sheet. So the main thing today was to improve the user interaction with the minimap, make sure the sector represents which one we've got selected each time. I'll also try and add a few more of the maps, so we've got a few more variations there to work with, but predominantly we're going to at least look at some of the icons of the menu, probably like the core ones which we start with when we start a new level on the first island of the first epoch, because the menu, there's different components to the menu once you progress to the higher epochs, where you can build a factory and lab, and you can do more resource gathering. So I'll chop out the bits and pieces that I need for this as it looks here, and we'll make a start on that tomorrow. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you come back again and watch more, and I will see you all again soon.